This video is a dramatization of the attack by anti-Afghanistan forces on U.S. and Afghan National Security Forces at COPKeating and O.P. Frisch in Nuristan, Afghanistan on October 3, 2009. This attack resulted in U.S. and ANSF casualties and catastrophic damage of COPKeating. All times during this video dramatization are in Afghan local. Established in July 2006 by the Kamdesh Provincial Reconstruction Team, COPKeating was located approximately 25 kilometers from the Pakistan border in the Kamdesh district, 226 kilometers northeast of Kabul, and 137 kilometers northeast of Jalalabad. The squadron headquarters was located at Fob Bostik, 30 kilometers southeast of COPKeating, and approximately 10 minutes by helicopter. Both the task force and brigade headquarters were located at Fob Feni and Jalalabad. Flight time from COPKeating to Fob Feni was 40 minutes. The COP was situated along the lone improved dirt road and surrounded by extremely rugged mountainous high ground and was positioned to interdict historic trafficking routes to and from Pakistan. AF and smugglers used this remote area to transport weapons, fighters and equipment, as well as timber and gems. The main A&A compound was located on COPKeating. The nearby village of Ermal was located 200 meters west of COPKeating and was connected by an unimproved dirt road. O.P. Frisch was situated due south of COPKeating on the prominent high ground east of the Afghan village of Kamdesh. The ground unit assigned to COPKeating and O.P. Frisch had experienced over 45 engagements since assuming responsibility in May 2009. On the day of the attack, 53 soldiers and 20 A&A troops occupied COPKeating. Forces at O.P. Frisch numbered 19 soldiers and 10 Afghan National Army. O.P. Frisch was located at a straight line distance of 2.2 kilometers from COPKeating and sits on high ground. There was a 2,144-foot elevation difference between COPKeating and O.P. Frisch, and they were not within line of sight of each other. Anti-Afghanistan forces conducted meetings in the months prior to the attacks with elders throughout the province. Simultaneously, they planned to conduct a large-scale, complex attack to overrun coalition force positions in Nuristan province. The planned attacks were timed to coincide with the scheduled closure of COPKeating and O.P. Frisch as an I.O. campaign favorable to the AAF. AAF forces occupied fighting positions inside the mosque on a nearby ridgeline at approximately 5:30 a.m. local on October 3, 2009. At the same time that the mosque was being occupied, support by fire Dishka positions were being placed in the vicinity of COPKeating. In the early morning hours of October 3, 2009, AAF executed the thoroughly planned assault with small arms fire, RPGs, and B-10 recoilless rifles from the surrounding high ground and the mosque. During the open attack, all of the AAF support by fire positions opened up on COPKeating. The fire from the SBF pinned down the mortar pit, and the soldiers were unable to return fire. Simultaneously, while the attack was started on COPKeating, another AAF element opened fire on O.P. Frisch. This event put the U.S. platoon at O.P. Frisch in their own fight, and they were unable to provide any fire support to COPKeating. Indirect fire from Fob Bostik began in support of COPKeating. Two F-15s arrived on station. They started engaging targets around COPKeating. U.S. and A&A forces were pinned down by the AAF in multiple positions surrounding COPKeating. The AAF executed a simultaneous attack from 3 different directions, supported by B-10 and RPG fire on all parts of the camp. Those assaults focused on the ECP, the ANA compound in the east and the western side of the camp. This forced the U.S. Operational Mentor and Liaison Team and the ANA to collapse into a smaller defensive perimeter within KOPKeating. At that time, 2 U.S. soldiers were pinned down by AAF fire in the mortar pit and could not join the defensive perimeter. At that time, coalition forces fell back to their final defensive perimeter. Due to the extreme number of AAF forces surrounding KOPKeating, the Apache contacted KOPKeating to determine the frontline trace of the defensive perimeter. At that time, they engaged the enemy leading to the bridge and provided air support to cover the KOPKeating mortar pit. A Predator began collection operations shortly after the battle started. Continuous UAS coverage remained on station for the entire battle. Buildings in the ANA and U.S. compounds started to burn and contributed to the smoke that obscured most of the area. O.P. Fritsch defeated AAF forces and were able to provide 120 mm mortar fire in support of KOPKeating. On the second weapon pass of the mosque, an AH-64 from the aerial weapons team was hit by Dishka fire and forced to return to base. The remaining aircraft from the aerial weapons team was also struck, but remained on station. Approximately 3.5 hours after the initial attack, the fires from the aerial weapons team and close air support suppressed the AF. This allowed the U.S. forces to attempt to retake lost positions within KOPKeating. During the fight, the AH-64s in support of ground forces came under intense enemy ground fire consisting of heavy machine guns and Dishka. During this period, a third AH-64 was struck by ground fire and was forced to return to base. As the aerial weapons team suppressed AAF elements, the defenders of the final defensive perimeter continued to push out to retake lost areas of KOPKeating. The advance to retake positions was hampered due to the lack of available manpower. Most of the buildings on the KOP were found to be on fire. However, the defenders were able to link up with the soldiers in the mortar pit. The first lift of the QRF from FOB Bostik arrived on station. Soon after their arrival at O.P. Fritsch, a weather hold was declared and further elements of the QRF were forced to wait at FOB Bostik. After an hour later, the weather hold was lifted, allowing the rest of the QRF to land at O.P. Fritsch. Within the first 3 hours after the attack, the ANA compound was completely engulfed in flames and the majority of the area was obscured by smoke. Fires from the ANA started to spread to the rest of KOPKeating. Approximately 8 hours after the attack, KOPKeating's TOC caught fire. The command element was displaced from the burning TOC and it was re-established in a secondary location. As the fire spread throughout the KOP, the soldiers at the aid station cut down an adjacent tree to prevent the fire from spreading to the aid station. The Quick Reaction Force departed O.P. Fritsch on foot to KOPKeating. This is a long movement downhill, and to complicate matters, the path was not direct. Switchbacks and the presence of AAF elements slowed movement. Approximately 9 hours after the attack began, all buildings were on fire at KOPKeating with the exception of one. Only the aid station remained safe, where the alternate TOC was co-located. During their descent to KOPKeating and approximately 2 hours into their movement, the lead elements of the QRF called in close air support and engaged the AAF. The engagement was short and forced the Quick Reaction Force to move to a bounding overwatch. This further slowed movement to COPKeating. As dusk fell, the Quick Reaction Force continued movement to COPKeating. Approximately 13 hours after the Battle of COPKeating began, the Quick Reaction Force entered COPKeating and began clearing operations. The Quick Reaction Force also assisted in the setup of a landing zone to allow for medevac flights. The intensity of enemy ground fire directed at the responding aircraft prevented the aerial medevac from infiltrating prior to the U.S. unit securing the HLZ. Both close air support and close combat aviation were instrumental in the ground operations defending COPKeating. 44 close air support airframes were employed for a total on-station time of approximately 21 hours. 21 close combat aviation were employed in support of COPKeating. ISR provided 12 platforms. In the confined mountainous constraints imposed in the vicinity surrounding COPKeating, 37 GBUs were expended, 2 Hellfire missiles were fired, and 3 strafing runs were conducted. A few minutes after the arrival of the Quick Reaction Force, the first medevac aircraft touched down and several of the wounded were loaded on the aircraft. Approximately 16 hours after the attack started, the last medevac aircraft departed COPKeating.